The wind off the channel came howling up the combe like a pack of unruly hounds, setting every shutter at Blackthorn Priory to rattling and making such a theatrical din that one might have suspected it of auditioning for a Gothic melodrama. Somewhere beyond the ancient yew hedges, the sea rehearsed its eternal complaint against the Dorset cliffs, while the cracked bell of St. Ethelburga's added its own discordant commentary on the general atmospheric unpleasantness. "It is not," observed Lord Peter Wimsey, adjusting his monocle against the driving rain as he emerged from his Daimler, "the sort of evening on which candles display their most Christian virtues. They are inclined to be brief." "Out, out, damned candle," declared Inspector Moffat of the County Constabulary, who had met them at the imposing oak door with the harried expression of a man whom the elements had personally wronged. "Brief," corrected Lord Peter with gentle firmness, shaking the rain from his perfectly tailored coat. "Macbeth's philosophical reflections on life's ephemeral nature are not improved by indiscriminate damnation, Inspector." The bard was quite specific about his metaphors. "Now then, pray introduce us to your immortal flame." Inspector Moffat, who had long since relegated titled amateurs to that special category of necessary evils that a public servant must endure with professional stoicism, led them through an echoing hall where two medieval crusaders lay in perpetual marble slumber beside their equally petrified hounds. A persistent draught, both purposeful and insinuating, swept down the passage, lifted a corner of an ancient Turkey carpet with casual impertinence, and expired with a theatrical sigh among the hanging coats. "Lord Peter Wimsey and Mr. Parker from London," announced Pollard, the butler, a square-faced man whose mournful correctness suggested he had outlived at least two masters and fully expected to outlive a third. "This way, if you please, gentlemen. Mrs. Dace awaits in the morning-room. Sir Cornelius is—" His eyes performed a suitable adjustment towards sorrow. "The inspector will direct you to the library." "Dead," said Moffat with the bluntness of a man who had exhausted his patience with euphemism. "Found at 4 this morning by the housekeeper, who claimed she smelled smoke. There was a candle beside him that we could not extinguish. We attempted—" "Yes?" Lord Peter's tone carried the politely interested detachment of someone informed that a new variety of turnip had failed to thrive. "It refused to be put out," Moffat continued, his reluctance to sound ridiculous making him sound increasingly truculent. "Absolutely refused." "Candles," murmured Lord Peter, "possess no moral agency, Inspector. They are governed by oxygen and physics, not ethics. What precisely did you do?" "Covered it with a glass dish," volunteered Pollard in sepulchral tones. "It flickered, my lord, and when we lifted the cover, it rekindled itself. Mrs. Dace declares it a sign from Providence. I myself venture no opinions on supernatural matters." "How refreshingly prudent," said Lord Peter. "Opinions have a distressing tendency to multiply when encouraged. May we examine the scene?" The library embodied that particular species of confident ugliness that had flourished among the newly prosperous in 1850. Bookcases of mahogany so aggressively red it appeared to have been stained with embarrassment, carpeting of a green so vivid it might have been borrowed from a billiard table, and a terrestrial globe that resembled nothing so much as an oversized grapefruit among more sober furnishings. Sir Cornelius Blackthorn occupied, or had been arranged to occupy, a leather wing chair, his silver head tilted at an angle, suggesting he had been listening to confidences from the storm. A candle on an ornate silver pricket burned beside his elbow with steady, officious determination, while a faint brown smear decorated the nearest arm of his chair. Lord Peter approached the flame, bent with scientific precision, and blew. The candle obediently guttered and immediately rekindled itself with the quiet persistence of a magistrate resuming his bench after a brief recess. "Bunter," said Lord Peter. "Certainly, my lord," replied his valet, producing from some interior dimension of his perfectly pressed person a small glass tumbler. With the efficiency of a conjurer, he inverted it over the flame, waited the appropriate interval, and removed it. The wick glowed, emitted a thread of smoke, and then, with a tiny blue tongue of almost insulting cheerfulness, burst back into flame. "Elementary chemistry," observed Lord Peter without enthusiasm. "I have witnessed children's tea parties abolished by no more ingenious expedient." "Trick candles?" suggested Parker with that particular dryness that simultaneously consulted and contradicted. "If so," said Moffat grimly, "I'll have the trick explained in plain English. We've no room for parlor magic in a murder investigation." He caught himself and glanced meaningfully at the butler, in what appears to be an unfortunate, natural occurrence. Lord Peter's attention had shifted to the brown smear on the chair arm. He touched it delicately with one finger and inhaled thoughtfully. "Wax," he announced, "but not this wax." He beckoned Bunter, who bent forward with hawk-like intensity and nodded as though acknowledging a formal introduction. "The draft," said Lord Peter, turning slightly, "displays considerable enterprise. Whence does it originate?" Pollard assumed an expression of pained dignity. "There is a deficiency, my lord, in the window casements." Sir Cornelius preferred to overlook such domestic imperfections. The gentleman possessed little affection for workmen and their measuring instruments. "Few autocrats do," murmured Lord Peter. "Their souls are vexed by fellows who insist upon precision. What have we here?" His gaze had fallen upon a shallow depression in the carpet beside the chair, as though something substantial had rested there and been subsequently removed. His eyes then traveled to a naked pricket on the mantelpiece, where a space in the dust pattern spoke more eloquently than any written testimony. "Missing salver," observed Parker quietly. Pollard stiffened with wounded professional pride. "The silver is entirely accounted for, sir. Mrs. Dace conducted her inventory only last evening." "Mrs. Dace counts by catalogue," said Lord Peter pleasantly. "Carpets record by conscience. Inspector, shall we interview the household individually? They invariably know nothing whatsoever, but their methods of knowing nothing can be remarkably instructive." The morning room possessed that peculiar gentility reserved for apartments designed to house only the most respectable emotions. Mrs. Dace, a woman whose pinched mouth and obsessively clean hands suggested someone perpetually enduring surgical attention without benefit of anesthetic, perched on the edge of a chair like a sparrow preparing for immediate flight. "Sir Cornelius was a most considerate master," she declared without preamble. "He maintained the house in proper order and would never permit the chapel to be neglected. Last evening the sanctuary lamp burned clear despite the gale. It is traditionally extinguished on the eve of St. Luke's feast. This time—" She folded her hands with mathematical precision and placed the resulting silence on the table like an offering. "It declined to be extinguished," suggested Lord Peter. Mrs. Dace's pale, coldly attentive eyes fixed upon him. "We offered our prayers," she said. "It continued burning." "Providence," said Moffat, pronouncing it as though it rhymed with evidence. "The Almighty," observed Lord Peter, "is not typically employed in matters of domestic ventilation. He delegates such responsibilities to contractors and their ilk. You indicate that this lamp customarily expires on St. Luke's Eve?" "Without fail," said Mrs. Dace with the obstinacy of someone defending a fundamental principle. "It has done so for 30 years. "Then the Almighty appears to have violated his own established precedent," murmured Lord Peter. "Most irregular. We must preserve his reputation by identifying the human agent of this deviation. Parker, you observed the window latch?" "Indeed. And I note that the chapel bell strikes with considerably less distortion here than elsewhere. The wind's interference seems diminished." "Precisely. Everything suffers less distortion from the wind in that location, save perhaps human testimony. Inspector, we have before us a flame that burns at improper times and in impossible places. I suspect Sir Cornelius may have practiced similar irregularities. We must consult the clocks, the carpets, and the kitchen staff in that precise order. They conspire unconsciously, which renders their testimony invaluable. Moffat grunted skeptically. If you can extract sense from that collection, my lord, I'll personally consume the evidence. I must respectfully decline that offer, said Lord Peter gravely. The candle may yet prove essential to our understanding. He smiled then, briefly and without warmth, as another gust rattled the ancient casements. Besides, Inspector, if we extinguished all our mysteries so readily, we should find ourselves perpetually in darkness, and that would never do. The wind howled its agreement from the chimney, and somewhere in the chapel an impossible flame continued its patient, inexplicable vigil. The interviews proceeded with the methodical precision of a military inspection, though Lord Peter's approach suggested less the parade ground than the drawing-room of a particularly observant hostess who had noticed someone sampling the sherry without permission. Mrs. Dace returned to her chair in the morning-room with that peculiar composure reserved for women who have spent their lives managing other people's disasters. Her hands, Lord Peter observed with interest, bore the telltale residue of recent silver polish. Curious, given Pollard's assurance that the inventory was both complete and current. "You discovered Sir Cornelius at 4 o'clock, Lord Peter began conversationally. "Rather early for domestic rounds, surely." "I maintain regular hours," Mrs. Dace replied with the defensive precision of someone whose entire existence depended upon the sanctity of routine. "Sir Cornelius often worked late. I check the fires and secure the windows before retiring. When I detected smoke—" Her pale eyes flickered toward the window, then returned with visible effort. "The scent carries strangely in this house, my lord. The passages connect in ways that confuse sound and smell alike. And the library door? Unlocked, naturally. Sir Cornelius never secured himself against his own household." Her voice carried that particular flatness reserved for reporting the inevitable. "The candle was burning exactly as you observed it. I attempted to rouse him, but medical attention was clearly superfluous." Lord Peter made a note in his small leather book. "The silver inventory you conducted yesterday evening, all pieces accounted for." Mrs. Dace's hands tightened imperceptibly in her lap. "Certainly, my lord. I maintain strict accounting, the Georgian salver from the library mantelpiece, the chapel candlesticks, all properly catalogued and secured." "The library mantelpiece?" Parker interjected quietly. "That is—" Mrs. Dace paused, her composure flickering like a candle in a draught. "The salver is kept in the plate room, naturally. It has no permanent place on any mantelpiece." "Of course not," murmured Lord Peter. "How foolish of us to suggest otherwise." Pollard's interview. The butler entered with the measured tread of a man bearing invisible but substantial responsibilities. His square face maintained that expression of dignified suffering that butlers reserve for occasions when the natural order has been disturbed by events beyond their administrative control. 18 years' service, Pollard intoned when asked, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated domestic wisdom. "I came from Lord Pemberton's establishment." Sir Cornelius valued regularity in all household matters. "His evening routine?" Parker prompted. "Coffee in the library at 8:30 precisely. The Times, correspondence, and any manuscripts requiring attention. Last evening he received a telegram that appeared to cause considerable agitation. He requested dinner on a tray and absolute privacy for his scholarly pursuits." Lord Peter's pen paused above his notebook. "The telegram's origin?" "London, my lord." Sir Cornelius read it in the hall and immediately withdrew to the library. "Most irregular behavior for a gentleman of such fixed habits." "And the silver pieces Mrs. Dace mentioned." Pollard's discomfort became visible, a slight tightening around his eyes. "The Georgian salver and 2 chapel candlesticks were discovered missing during the evening inventory. Mrs. Dace was most concerned about proper accounting. The items have not yet been located." The library door, Lord Peter observed casually, appears to latch with unusual cooperation this morning. Indeed, my lord. The mechanism has been troublesome for months. Requires considerable pressure to secure properly. Last evening, however, it closed with remarkable ease. Pollard's tone suggested this mechanical cooperation was somehow unseemly. Ivy's testimony. Young Ivy entered like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a cathedral and now found herself trapped among monuments too solemn for comprehension. Her cap sat askew, and her hands worked her apron into increasingly complex configurations. "Don't be frightened," Lord Peter said kindly. "We simply require your observations about yesterday evening." "Yes, my lord, only everything was different, wasn't it? Sir Cornelius taking dinner in the library, and Mrs. Dace in such a state about the missing silver. Made me search every cupboard twice. She did, and then went to the chapel herself to check the altar furnishings. She was gone long. Ever so long, my lord, and when she returned, she looked—" Ivy glanced nervously toward the door. Frightened, like she'd seen something that oughtn't to be there, kept looking toward the library windows, as though expecting to see someone watching from inside. "The library faces the chapel?" "Yes, my lord. Clear view of the altar from Sir Cornelius's chair. He often remarked upon it during evening prayers, 8 o'clock precisely, every night facing the chapel through the window." Lord Peter leaned forward with increased attention. "And the chapel itself? Any unusual sounds or disturbances recently?" Ivy's face grew pale. "There's been sounds at night when the wind's up, my lord. Like someone moving about, lighting candles and such. But when you look, there's nothing but shadows, and the bell sometimes rings when there's no one pulling the rope." Pottle's contribution. The final interview was conducted in the kitchen garden, where Pottle, the gardener, was methodically destroying slugs with the concentrated malice of a man conducting personal warfare against the invertebrate kingdom. "You maintain the chapel grounds?" Lord Peter inquired. "Aye." Pottle's response contained roughly the same enthusiasm as his slug-hunting technique. "Observed anything unusual recently?" "Lights at irregular hours, perhaps." Pottle considered this with the thoroughness of someone evaluating a particularly suspicious cabbage. "Chapel's locked after Sunday service. Has been for years, but there's been candles burning Tuesday and Wednesday nights. Saw them from the cottage." "Did you investigate?" "Not my business what the gentry do with their prayers." Pottle's tone relegated the spiritual practices of the upper classes to the same category as their other incomprehensible hobbies. "The bell. Heard it ring at midnight Tuesday. No wind to speak of. Someone was pulling that rope deliberate-like." Whimsy's observations. As they returned to the house, Parker observed quietly, "The silver, the chapel disturbances, the irregular prayers, they're connected." "Indeed," Lord Peter replied, his monocle catching the pale morning light. "And our Mrs. Dace monitors something requiring regular observation and careful timing. The missing silver suggests preparation rather than theft, while the candle's behavior indicates mechanical rather than supernatural intervention." They paused at the library door, where the impossible flame continued its patient vigil. "The question," murmured Lord Peter, "is whether our perpetrator intended the candle as evidence or concealment. In my experience, criminals who employ theatrical effects rarely resist observing their audience's reaction." As if summoned by his words, a curtain twitched in an upper window, and Lord Peter smiled with quiet satisfaction. Someone in Blackthorn Priory was indeed watching them very carefully. The twitching curtain proved prophetic, for scarcely had Lord Peter made his observation when the distinctive wheeze of an overlabored motor announced an arrival that Inspector Moffat would undoubtedly regard as providential intervention. A somewhat battered grey Morris deposited upon the gravel drive a young man whose appearance suggested he had dressed hastily in garments borrowed from someone considerably more solvent. Arthur Blackthorne possessed that particular species of nervous energy which manifests itself in excessive gesticulation and a tendency toward theatrical protestation. He was perhaps 30, dark and reasonably well-featured, with that glossy air which persuades barmaids they have encountered a gentleman, and persuades gentlemen they have encountered an actor. His clothes, while well cut, bore the telltale signs of financial embarrassment. Frayed cuffs artfully concealed, a waistcoat turned once too often, and shoes that had clearly been acquainted with several cobblers of varying competence. "Dreadful business," he announced before anyone had spoken, his pale eyes darting between the assembled company like those of a cornered animal calculating distances to available exits. "Received word from Mrs. Dace this morning." Uncle Cornelius seemed perfectly robust when I saw him Tuesday. "What precisely happened?" "That," said Inspector Moffat with barely concealed satisfaction, "is what we intend to establish. Your whereabouts last evening between 8 and midnight, Mr. Blackthorne." Arthur's laugh contained no humor whatsoever. "Dorchester. At the Saracen's Head until well past 11. I was engaged with—" He allowed the sentence to trail into the kind of silence that must be measured to be properly appreciated. "With a lady friend. A Mrs. Vale, if you must know. She will confirm my presence." "A married lady?" Parker inquired with professional delicacy. "Regrettably, yes. Her husband is a gentleman in the drapery trade who regards arithmetic as a form of religious observance. She will not thank me for involving her in sordid proceedings." Lord Peter, who had been examining Arthur with the detached interest of a collector evaluating a questionable antiquity, made careful notes. The young man's hands displayed recent ink stains of an unusual blue-black color. His left sleeve bore traces of silver polish, and his cuff showed a telltale smear of beeswax. "Your recent business with Sir Cornelius," Moffat continued relentlessly, "concerned a medieval charter, I believe." Arthur's discomfort became immediately visible. A simple disagreement regarding authentication procedures. Uncle Cornelius possessed strong opinions about historical accuracy, perhaps overly suspicious of any manuscript that hadn't been gathering dust in his personal collection for decades. The Glastonbury charter I had acquired was entirely legitimate. "Your uncle," observed Lord Peter mildly, "was acknowledged as the foremost authority on medieval forgeries in England. His monograph on 13th-century ecclesiastical documents is regarded as definitive. Rather an unfortunate expert to attempt deceiving." "I wasn't attempting to deceive anyone," Arthur protested with wounded dignity. "The charter was purchased from a reputable London dealer. If Uncle Cornelius chose to question its provenance based on some pedantic objection to pigment composition or watermark analysis, that hardly constitutes fraud." "Nevertheless," Moffat pressed, "witnesses at the county society meeting heard you say, 'You will not live to enjoy your triumph over me.'" Arthur flushed deeply. Rhetoric born of humiliation. He had goaded me before colleagues and ladies. "If men are to be hanged for figures of speech, Inspector, we shall require considerably more rope than Dorset can supply. There is also," Moffat continued with evident relish, producing a smudged receipt, "the matter of your motor car purchasing petrol at Mrs. Fells's shop at 9:40 last evening. The customer signed a Blackthorne with a flourish that would make a writing master weep." Arthur examined the paper with admirable coolness. "I lent my motor to Mrs. Vale's brother for the evening. We were all together. Cards, conversation, the drink being poor but abundant. If your constable wished to embellish his notebook with my initials, I can hardly prevent him." "Your financial circumstances," Parker inquired tactfully, "have been somewhat strained recently." "Strained?" Arthur's laugh was bitter. "They have progressed well beyond strain into the realm of catastrophic collapse. Gaming debts, unfortunate investments in horses whose enthusiasm exceeded their velocity. Uncle Cornelius had made his position quite clear regarding any further assistance. His exact words were that I possessed the Midas touch in reverse. Inspector Moffat's satisfaction was becoming increasingly obvious. Motive, means, and opportunity, Mr. Blackthorne. The forged charter provided grounds for public disgrace. Your debts created desperate necessity, and your presence in the vicinity places you conveniently near the scene. But I was with Mrs. Vale, Arthur protested. From 8 o'clock until after midnight. She will confirm every detail. Married ladies, observed Lord Peter conversationally, have been known to provide alibis for gentlemen whose company they find agreeable, regardless of the gentleman's actual whereabouts during relevant periods. It is a curious feature of human nature. As Arthur provided his London address with obvious reluctance, Lord Peter wandered to the library window, gazing thoughtfully toward the chapel where the impossible candle maintained its patient vigil. "Inspector," he said quietly, "before we embrace Mr. Blackthorne as our solution, might we examine the physical evidence more carefully? Motive and opportunity are compelling, but method remains mysteriously absent from our calculations. Murder by candlelight requires patience, precision, and intimate knowledge of domestic habits, qualities that rarely coexist with gambling debts and forged charters." Arthur, uncertain whether to feel insulted or relieved, looked from face to face as another gust rattled the ancient casements. The investigation, despite Moffat's satisfaction, was far from concluded. The suggestion that method remained mysteriously absent from their calculations appeared to amuse Lord Peter considerably. He developed that particular species of intellectual restlessness which manifested as an inability to remain confined to obvious conclusions, especially when those conclusions satisfied Inspector Moffat quite so completely. Arthur Blackthorne's guilt might appear mathematically inevitable, but mathematics, as Lord Peter had observed on previous occasions, possessed an unfortunate tendency toward oversimplification when applied to human psychology. "Inspector," he said with that dangerous courtesy which announced the discovery of an engaging puzzle, "while you secure Mr. Blackthorne's formal statement, might we pursue certain domestic inquiries of a more esoteric nature? The devil, as they say, inhabits the details with remarkable persistence." Inspector Moffat, clearly convinced that further investigation represented unnecessary complication of a satisfactorily resolved matter, waved dismissively. "Pursue whatever details amuse you, my lord. The case appears sufficiently clear without additional theatrical flourishes." Lord Peter's smile suggested he found this assessment charmingly optimistic. "Bunter, we shall require Mrs. Dace's expertise regarding chapel maintenance procedures. Also, young Ivy might enlighten us about certain household peculiarities that have captured my attention." The chapel investigation proved immediately illuminating. Mrs. Dace accompanied them with that particular resignation reserved for women perpetually required to explain obvious matters to obtuse gentlemen. The sanctuary lamp, suspended by elaborate brass chains, burned with steady determination despite the gale's interference. "The oil employed," Lord Peter inquired conversationally, "follows ecclesiastical specifications." "Sacred lamp oil from Harrod's religious department," Mrs. Dace replied with the precision of someone defending fundamental principles. "Sir Cornelius maintained correspondence with the supplier regarding proper viscosity and flash point requirements. He tolerated no substitutions. And the wick construction. Plated cotton, professionally manufactured. The flame burns precisely 4 hours per fluid ounce under normal atmospheric conditions." Her pale eyes flickered toward the renovated bell chamber. "The recent soundproofing installation ensures consistent burning despite weather disturbances." Lord Peter examined the lamp mechanism with scientific thoroughness. "The bell chamber renovation, Sir Cornelius's initiative. Completed last spring. He insisted upon acoustic precision for proper timing of devotional exercises. The rope mechanism now operates with mechanical reliability regardless of atmospheric interference." "Most thoughtful," murmured Lord Peter, measuring with his pocket rule the distance between lamp and nearest window. Soundproofing serves multiple purposes, I imagine. Returning to the library, Lord Peter's attention focused upon the carpet's generous pile. He consulted Bunter with the gravity of a surveyor treating with another expert. The thickness, Bunter? 1/4-inch pile when uncompressed, my lord. Persian weave, approximately 8 threads per tuft, sufficient to muffle considerable weight when properly distributed. Indeed, heavy objects might be transported across this surface without acoustic betrayal. Lord Peter knelt beside Sir Cornelius's chair, examining the depression in the carpet with magnifying precision. Something substantial rested here, long enough to compress even this forgiving surface. Young Ivy's testimony proved equally revealing. Summoned to the morning room, she clutched her apron with the desperation of someone expecting incomprehensible adult complications. The telephone exchange, Lord Peter began kindly, operates on Sunday evenings. Only for emergencies, my lord. Miss Hartwell attends church regular-like. Sunday calls must be placed through the vicar's residence after 9 o'clock. And Tuesday evening, any telephone activity you observed? Ivy's face brightened with relief at answering a definite question. Mrs. Dace placed a London call just after dinner, my lord. Ever so urgent, she said. Spoke for nearly 20 minutes, though the words weren't clear from the kitchen. Your hearing appears remarkably acute. Cook says I can hear mice thinking, my lord, useful for knowing when Mrs. Dace approaches unannounced. Lord Peter made careful notes. You mentioned bat disturbances during previous testimony. Tuesday evening specifically? Ivy's face paled dramatically. Heard them squeaking something dreadful around 9 o'clock, my lord. But when I looked from the kitchen window, there weren't no bats at all, just shadows moving about inside the chapel, like someone carrying candles back and forth. The library's metronome occupied Lord Peter's attention next. The elaborate Victorian specimen in polished walnut bore recent fingerprints and showed evidence of careful adjustment. Recently calibrated, observed Bunter after thorough examination. Set to andante, 60 beats per minute precisely. The mechanism appears recently wound. Pollard materialized with supernatural butler punctuality. Sir Cornelius possessed no musical inclinations whatsoever, my lord. The metronome belonged to his late wife, untouched for 15 years until Tuesday evening, when I observed him adjusting it with considerable concentration. Lord Peter wound the device and set it ticking. The steady beat filled the library with mechanical precision, each tick marking exactly 1 measured second. 60 beats per minute, he murmured. Remarkably convenient for calculating precise intervals. His attention then shifted to the heavy curtains flanking the chapel-facing window. As wind gusted against the glass, the fabric moved with curious regularity. Not random billowing, but rhythmic expansion and contraction suggesting deliberate draft management. Parker, he said quietly, observe the curtain's breathing pattern. They watched as the heavy damask inhaled and exhaled with metronomic precision, each movement timed to coincide with the mechanical beats echoing from Sir Cornelius's desk. Lord Peter examined the window latch with scientific precision. The catch had been adjusted to maintain a gap of perhaps half an inch, insufficient for casual notice, but adequate for controlled airflow when combined with appropriate atmospheric pressure. The chapel's improved acoustics, he observed thoughtfully. The soundproofed chamber, the precisely regulated draft, the metronome's recent calibration, someone has transformed this library into a remarkably sophisticated instrument for measuring and manipulating both time and sound. As if summoned by his observation, the chapel bell tolled 11 o'clock with crystalline clarity despite the gale's interference. Lord Peter consulted his pocket watch and smiled with quiet satisfaction. Punctuality remains admirable, he announced, even under mysterious circumstances. The investigation was revealing complexities extending far beyond simple murder for financial gain. The punctual announcement of 11 o'clock from St. Ethelburga's bell provided Lord Peter with that species of mathematical satisfaction which arrives when disparate observations suddenly align themselves into coherent patterns. He consulted his pocket watch with the precision of someone discovering that the universe had momentarily agreed to operate according to logical principles, despite considerable atmospheric interference from both wind and human nature. "Parker," he announced with renewed energy, "we must dissect Tuesday evening's chronology with the thoroughness of a Swiss clockmaker examining a competitor's mechanism. Someone has invested extraordinary effort in creating temporal precision. We should honor their industry by examining it with equal rigor." They began with the most reliable chronometer available, the landing clock, whose elaborate Victorian case suggested it had been designed by someone who regarded punctuality as both art form and moral imperative. Lord Peter lifted the glazed front with Pollard's pained permission, revealing a mechanism that bore unmistakable evidence of recent intimate attention. "Observe, Parker," he murmured, indicating a small wooden wedge that arrested the pendulum's natural arc. "Some person has treated this chronometer with an intimacy bordering on the illicit." The minute hand displayed faint traces of metal polish, while 2 deliberate scratches marked the dial at 10 past and 20 to the hour, precisely the marks a hurried thumbnail might leave during hasty adjustment. "Deliberate missetting," Parker observed. "Or devotional correction," suggested Lord Peter blandly. "We must never underestimate the piety of punctuality. Bunter, what time does this ambitious timepiece currently announce?" 11:53, my lord. However, the mechanism shows evidence of recent manipulation, reset within the past 48 hours, I should estimate. Pollard materialized with supernatural promptness. "The landing clock has displayed irregular behavior recently, my lord. Tuesday evening it chimed 10:30 precisely as I secured the front door. Most unusual, as it typically maintains a consistent 7-minute delay. 7 minutes consistently. For 3 years precisely, my lord." Tuesday evening's accuracy was unprecedented and rather unsettling. They proceeded to reconstruct the evening in measured segments, beginning with the kitchen where cook maintained her domain with militant efficiency. Her testimony established dinner service at 7:30 by the landing clock, which, being 7 minutes slow rather than fast as recently adjusted, meant approximately 23 minutes past 7 by accurate reckoning. Sir Cornelius requested the tray be collected at 10:30 precisely, young Ivy confirmed nervously. "Most particular, he was about the exact time, my lord. Not before, not after." Lord Peter made careful calculations in his leather notebook. 2 hours and 40 minutes for undisturbed scholarly pursuits, remarkably specific for a gentleman requesting privacy. The London telephone call provided their next chronological anchor. Miss Hartwell's exchange records, maintained with the precision that only comes from civic responsibility and natural pedantry, showed a trunk connection opened at 7:42 and cleared at 8:01. 19 minutes of urgent conversation that Mrs. Dace had attempted to conduct privately. "Now," said Lord Peter cheerfully, "for the petrol purchase that so delights Inspector Moffat." Mrs. Fells's village shop produced the receipt with 9:40 written large and a sprawling signature reading A. Blackthorne. However, Mrs. Fells also revealed that her wall clock, a pretentious American affair with loud aspirations, ran consistently fast by Wednesday evening. 8 minutes ahead of the parish bell, Lord Peter confirmed after comparison with St. Ethelburga's reliable chronometer. "Your 9:40 was actually 9:32 by accurate reckoning." More significantly, Mrs. Fells described the customer as wearing a dark coat and muffler, hat pulled low against the wind, with a voice that seemed familiar though muffled. The motor itself had been knocking something dreadful, like the engine had been fed gravel instead of proper petrol. Bunter's examination of the signature proved illuminating. "Distinct disparities from Mr. Blackthorne's natural hand, my lord." variable pressure, hesitations before ascenders, and shaded downstrokes inconsistent with fountain pen usage. The receipt was written with a steel nib affected by corrosion. 35 minutes to drive from here to Dorchester under optimal conditions, Parker supplied. 45 allowing for weather and livestock interference. So, Lord Peter calculated, a motor at Mrs. Fells's at 9:32 could reach Dorchester near 10:15. Hardly impossible for someone maintaining an alibi, but requiring precise timing and considerable theatrical skill. The chapel investigation revealed the most mathematically impossible element of their chronology. Mrs. Dace's sacred lamp oil, burning at the prescribed rate of 4 hours per fluid ounce, should have consumed approximately 15 ounces during the 60 hours since Tuesday evening. Yet the reservoir contained evidence of only 6 ounces maximum capacity. Elementary mathematics indicates this lamp should have expired Wednesday afternoon, Lord Peter observed. Either the Almighty has suspended the laws of combustion for our entertainment, or someone has maintained this flame through mechanical rather than divine intervention. The altar candles proved equally revealing. Tall beeswax columns with suspiciously clean-cut wicks showed none of the natural guttering expected from extended burning. More tellingly, wax spatter on the north choir stole sat at a height incompatible with steady combustion, suggesting candles that had been extinguished, relocated, and deliberately rekindled. Beeswax rather than stearine, Lord Peter noted, comparing samples. Higher melting point, more cooperative about relighting from smoldering wicks. Children's trick candles employ magnesium dust for resurrection effects. Adults apply similar principles with less innocent intent. The bell tower provided their final chronological puzzle. The elderly verger, Mr. Crumpet, possessed that species of precise memory which develops in men whose lives revolve around ecclesiastical punctuality. Tuesday evening's activities extended well past normal hours, he confirmed. Lights burning in the chapel until nearly 10 o'clock, most irregular for Sir Cornelius's fixed habits. The Priory bell chimed 10:30 with remarkable clarity. 3 distinct chimes marking the half-hour, though I observed no one pulling the rope. The recent soundproofing, Lord Peter mused, ensures acoustic precision where desired and elimination where convenient. A bell that chimes without visible operation suggests mechanical timing rather than human presence. Returning to the library, Lord Peter assembled their chronological discoveries with the satisfaction of someone completing a complex mathematical proof. Observe our temporal pattern, Parker. Dinner concludes by 8 o'clock, accurate time. The London call terminates at 8:01 by exchange records. Chapel activities extend until 10 o'clock. The mysterious petrol purchase occurs at 9:32 parish time. The reformed landing clock announces 10:30 with unprecedented accuracy, while the Priory bell provides acoustic confirmation of the same moment. Someone orchestrated considerable chronological precision, Parker agreed. Indeed. But observe the mathematical impossibilities embedded within this careful timing. Lord Peter gestured toward the persistent candle flame. Our perpetrator has created a machinery of time and acoustics. The metronome provides counted intervals, the adjusted window creates controlled airflow, the doctored candles provide theatrical resurrection, and the synchronized clocks establish false chronologies for alibis and misdirection. He consulted his calculations once more, his expression growing increasingly satisfied. The landing clock's deliberate adjustment allowed someone to appear early or depart late according to desired illusion. When clocks disagree, human beings invariably choose the timepiece that flatters their requirements. Our murderer counted on that fatal courtesy to chronological convenience. The times refused to reconcile, Parker observed, because someone arranged that they should quarrel systematically. Precisely, said Lord Peter, gazing toward the chapel where the impossible flame maintained its stubborn vigil. We are confronted not merely with murder, but with temporal larceny on a grand scale. Someone has stolen time itself, redistributed it according to personal convenience, and left us with chronological chaos as evidence of their industry. The wind howled its agreement through ancient stonework, while somewhere in Blackthorn Priory's depths a carefully adjusted clock chimed the half-hour with suspicious, mechanical reliability. The investigation had revealed not random coincidence, but conspiracy against chronology itself. The conspiracy against chronology had exposed mechanical precision in Tuesday evening's events, but Lord Peter's satisfaction with temporal puzzles diminished considerably when confronted with the locked drawer in Sir Cornelius's mahogany desk. The key, discovered after systematic searching in a hollowed prayer book, had been concealed with that particular care reserved for correspondence capable of posthumously embarrassing the respectable dead. Bunter, Lord Peter observed as his valet applied professional expertise to the resistant lock. We are about to discover why someone invested such elaborate theatrical effort in manipulating time itself. Simple murder rarely requires such obsessive attention to chronological detail. The drawer yielded documents that transformed their understanding of both victim and household with uncomfortable thoroughness. Sir Cornelius Blackthorn, pillar of archaeological respectability, had maintained a secondary existence that would have scandalized the county society and possibly interested Scotland Yard's art fraud division. His correspondence, filed with pedantic precision, revealed a gentleman whose scholarly reputation for exposing medieval forgeries coexisted uneasily with questionable acquisition methods. Letters to continental dealers discussed removing certain ecclesiastical items from monastic custody before official inventories complicate future transactions. More disturbing were invoices from London theatrical suppliers for ecclesiastical candles guaranteed inextinguishable under adverse atmospheric conditions and sanctuary oil with extended burning properties for demonstration purposes. "Observe this telegram," Lord Peter murmured, examining a crumpled message dated Tuesday afternoon. 6 words from a Fleet Street journalist. Evidence. Secured Thursday demonstration. Prepare defense. Someone had threatened to expose Sir Cornelius's methods of acquiring his precious relics. Parker examined additional correspondence with growing interest. Here's a letter from Sotheby's regarding authentication fees. Sir Cornelius charged substantial sums for detecting fraudulent manuscripts, but these carbon copies suggest he also created the very forgeries he later exposed, controlling both sides of a lucrative market. The most significant discovery lay in a manila envelope marked Private Medical Services, Confidential. The documents within transformed Mrs. Dace from mysterious housekeeper into someone whose professional qualifications extended into considerably darker territory than domestic management. Her nursing certificate from St. Bartholomew's Hospital was accompanied by references from the saint. Agatha's private registry, specializing in delicate cases requiring absolute discretion. The testimonials employed that particular medical euphemism which conceals lethal expertise behind compassionate language. Miss Dace possesses unparalleled skill in keeping difficult patients comfortable and quiet during terminal phases of illness. Professional euthanasia, Parker observed grimly, disguised as compassionate nursing. A telephone inquiry to the registry's Miss Tarrant proved illuminating. Ada Dace left our service rather suddenly, she confirmed with professional discretion. There was an unfortunate incident involving Lord Pemberton, officially heart failure, but the family requested our complete silence regarding the circumstances. She possessed remarkable expertise with pharmaceutical preparations, particularly in cases where prolonged suffering required management. The final piece of correspondence proved most revealing. A letter from Sir Cornelius's London solicitor, received Tuesday morning, warned of a reopened police inquiry into Lord Pemberton's death 15 years previous. New evidence suggested deliberate poisoning, and investigators were examining the backgrounds of all private nurses employed during his final illness. Mrs. Dace's urgent Tuesday telephone call, Lord Peter observed with satisfaction, was clearly an attempt to manage a crisis threatening to expose not merely her past, but her present activities. Their answer to the murder method lay concealed behind Sir Cornelius's bedroom wardrobe. A small brown bottle, partially hidden between desk and skirting, bore traces of chloral hydrate, a nurse's traditional ally for maintaining patient docility. More significantly, Sir Cornelius's private medical records revealed his treatment for advanced cardiac disease through carefully regulated digitalis preparations. A letter to his London physician, dated 1 week before his death, proved particularly damning. I suspect deliberate interference with my prescribed medications. My housekeeper possesses medical training that may extend beyond domestic requirements. I observe irregularities in my treatment schedule and request immediate consultation regarding protective measures. The physician's reply, found unopened in Tuesday's post, recommended immediate removal to London and warned that Sir Cornelius's suspicions regarding household tampering with his digitalis were medically plausible and potentially fatal. She was slowly adjusting his cardiac medication, Lord Peter concluded, creating the appearance of natural decline while preparing for a more dramatic conclusion. A skilled nurse could easily manipulate digitalis dosages to produce fatal irregularities when required. The brown smear on the library chair arm now revealed its significance, not candle wax, but the residue of chloral administration. Sir Cornelius had been rendered helpless while Mrs. Dace orchestrated her elaborate temporal performance, adjusting clocks and staging alibis around an incapacitated victim. The theatrical candles, the synchronized chronometry, the acoustic manipulations, Lord Peter continued, were designed to create supernatural explanations for a methodically planned execution. Mrs. Dace eliminated the one person capable of exposing her lethal expertise while constructing an alibi that defied conventional investigation. As they prepared to confront their suspect, Bunter materialized with characteristic supernatural timing. "Mrs. Dace has departed for London on urgent family business, my lord. She received a telegram and left immediately." "How remarkably prescient," murmured Lord Peter, adjusting his monocle as another gust rattled the ancient casements. "However, Mrs. Dace's departure may prove premature. I suspect her final performance contains complexities we have yet to fully appreciate." The investigation had revealed hidden lives beneath respectable surfaces, but the mechanical precision of Tuesday evening's events suggested that Mrs. Dace's theatrical masterpiece was yet to be completely understood. Mrs. Dace's precipitous departure for London, while dramatically convenient for her immediate purposes, left behind a collection of physical evidence that refused to accommodate her absence with equal theatrical cooperation. Lord Peter, who had long observed that guilty parties invariably overlooked some crucial detail in their haste to avoid consequences, began re-examining those seemingly trivial observations that had accumulated during their investigation like dust in neglected corners, and with considerably more significance. "The missing silver salver," he announced to Parker with renewed energy, "deserves considerably more attention than we have accorded it. Mrs. Dace's inventory anxiety suggests an object whose absence might prove more illuminating than its presence ever was." They discovered the Georgian piece in the chapel sacristy, concealed behind altar linens with the care of someone hiding evidence rather than storing valuables. The salver bore unmistakable traces of recent use, a circular soot pattern around its rim, tiny white granules clinging to its polished surface like metallic frost, and a peculiar depression in its center, suggesting prolonged contact with heated objects. "Observe the residue," Lord Peter murmured, scraping samples with scientific precision. Bunter's examination revealed particles that glittered faintly when exposed to flame, the telltale signature of metallic compounds designed to aid combustion. Our salver served as more than decorative storage. It was a stage for chemical theatrics. Cook's testimony, when revisited with specific questions about candle varieties, proved remarkably illuminating. She entered the morning room with the satisfied air of someone whose memory had finally been properly consulted, rather than dismissed as elderly fancy. "Mrs. Dace ordered special candles from London," she confirmed with evident pleasure at being taken seriously. "Ever so particular about the type. Beeswax with cotton wicks," she said, "for proper chapel burning. Cost a pretty penny, they did, but she insisted nothing else would serve for religious purposes." "You mentioned children's trick candles during earlier conversation," Lord Peter prompted gently. Cook's face brightened with recollection. "My nephew had them at his birthday party 2 summers past. You'd blow them out, and they'd spring back to life like jack-in-the-boxes. He said they had special powder in the wicks, magnesium dust or some such scientific nonsense, made them smell sharp when they rekindled, like metal catching fire." "And the candles Mrs. Dace employed?" "Same smell exactly, my lord. Sharp and metallic when the flame jumped back. I thought it queer at the time, but she said it was the sacred nature of beeswax that made it burn so devoutly." Young Ivy's recollections, when encouraged with patient questioning, revealed additional details that transformed understanding of Tuesday evening's careful preparations. "Mrs. Dace was ever so particular about that library window," she admitted nervously. "Measured the opening with her little ivory ruler, exactly 1/2 inch, she said, for Sir Cornelius's devotional breathing. When it banged in the wind, she adjusted it again, most precise-like. The chapel activities you observed. She carried the salver there herself, loaded with candles and little bottles. Said they were for special prayers, but the bottles smelled medicinal, like the mixture Father takes for his chest complaints. She spent considerable time arranging everything just so, checking her pocket watch every few minutes." Lord Peter's examination of the library window revealed mechanical sophistication that elevated domestic detail to criminal ingenuity. The casement had been modified with nearly invisible brass fittings that allowed precise control of the opening gap. More significantly, the window's positioning created controlled airflow that interacted with the chapel's recent acoustic modifications to carry sounds with unnatural clarity. "Controlled draft," Parker observed, tracing the air current with his finger. "Sufficient to reoxygenate smoldering wicks at measured intervals, but not enough to maintain constant flame." "Precisely. When one covers our theatrical candle with an inverted glass," Lord Peter demonstrated using a tumbler from Sir Cornelius's desk, "the oxygen diminishes and the flame dies, leaving the treated wick glowing. Remove the cover at the precise moment when the draft bellows inward, and one achieves miraculous resurrection. Children clap, inspectors frown, housekeepers praise Providence." The beeswax evidence proved particularly damning when compared with samples from the persistent library flame. Chemical analysis revealed identical composition and the presence of those metallic compounds that explained the candle's supernatural resurrection properties. More significantly, the wick construction employed a double-core system that allowed controlled reignition after apparent extinguishment. "Children's party tricks," Lord Peter observed with dry appreciation, "elevated to murderous sophistication through professional nursing expertise." The metronome's steady ticking now revealed its true purpose, not musical indulgence but mechanical conductor for orchestrating precise timing. The 60-beat rhythm provided exact intervals for coordinating window adjustments, candle manipulations, and bell operations with clockwork precision. Mrs. Dace transformed domestic objects into an elaborate murder machine, Parker observed grimly. Every clock, candle, and window became part of her mechanical conspiracy against chronology itself. The missing salver had served as her mobile laboratory, transporting specialized candles, chemical preparations, and timing devices between library and chapel. Its concealment in the sacristy represented not theft, but evidence disposal, hiding the tools of theatrical murder behind religious respectability. Indeed, Lord Peter agreed, gazing toward the chapel where the impossible flame continued its stubborn performance. But mechanical precision, however elaborate, invariably contains human imperfections. Mrs. Dace's theatrical masterpiece succeeded too completely. The very impossibility of her effects demands explanation rather than acceptance. The investigation had revealed not supernatural intervention, but mechanical ingenuity applied to murderous purpose with chilling professional expertise. The mechanical ingenuity applied to murderous purpose demanded demonstration rather than mere explanation, as Lord Peter had long observed that the most elaborate criminal schemes possessed an inherent theatrical quality that compelled their creators toward public performance. Mrs. Dace's elaborate conspiracy against chronology and candlelight required an appreciative audience to fully comprehend its diabolical sophistication. "Inspector," Lord Peter announced as midnight settled over Blackthorn Priory with characteristic Dorset determination, "we shall recreate Tuesday evening's performance with scientific precision. The murderer's theatrical masterpiece deserves proper, critical appreciation." He had arranged the library like a stage, with Inspector Moffat occupying the stalls, Parker stationed in the wings, and the assembled household, Pollard, young Ivy, and Cook, serving as a chorus of increasingly nervous witnesses. The wind had moderated to that steady, insinuating breath which set ancient casements to whispering and provided the atmospheric cooperation essential to Mrs. Dace's mechanical conspiracy. "We begin," Lord Peter declared, positioning one of the recovered theatrical candles upon Sir Cornelius's desk, with the miracle of resurrection through applied chemistry rather than divine intervention. "Bunter, the tumbler, if you please." The candle burned with steady determination, its flame displaying that particular smugness reserved for objects behaving contrary to natural law. Lord Peter inverted the glass tumbler over the wick with scientific precision. The flame struggled briefly, diminished to a blue thread, and expired with apparent finality, leaving only a glowing ember that pulsed like a tiny heart in the darkness. "Observe the treated wick," he murmured, consulting the metronome's steady 60-beat rhythm. "Impregnated with metallic compounds, magnesium dust to be precise, that maintain combustion potential even after apparent extinguishment. Cook's nephew's birthday candles employed identical principles, though with considerably less lethal application." At precisely the 60th beat, Lord Peter lifted the glass cover just as the controlled draft swept inward through the library's adjusted window. The ember flared immediately back to life with that sharp, metallic scent Cook had remembered, transforming apparent death into miraculous resurrection with clockwork reliability. "Children clap," Lord Peter observed with quiet satisfaction. "Adults invoke Providence. Both responses serve the murderer's purpose equally well." Inspector Moffat's grudging fascination was interrupted by the chapel bell's sudden tolling. 11 precise chimes that rang with crystalline clarity despite the absence of any visible bell ringer. The sound carried through the library's opened window with unnatural precision, each note arriving with mechanical punctuality. "The soundproofed bell chamber," Lord Peter explained, indicating a slender cord barely visible against the window frame, "contains modifications that serve multiple purposes." Mrs. Dace installed acoustic controls under the pretense of improving devotional precision, but mechanical timing proves more reliable than human piety for establishing alibis. He then executed the demonstration's most theatrical element, approaching the bookcase that flanked the fireplace and pressing at a specific point near the lower shelf. A soft click answered, and the entire section swung inward upon silent hinges, revealing a passage no wider than a confession and considerably more useful for concealing sins. "Monastic night stairs," he announced cheerfully, and vanished into the medieval darkness with supernatural abruptness. His voice continued from invisible locations within the ancient walls, explaining the servants' passages that connected every room with Tudor efficiency. Mrs. Dace employed these routes for movement between library and chapel while maintaining audible presence through carefully positioned acoustic projection. Medieval builders understood the value of invisible observation. Inspector Moffat found himself addressing empty air, while Lord Peter's responses echoed from various directions with ghostly persistence. Young Ivy clutched her apron with the desperation of someone whose supernatural fears were being systematically confirmed through scientific demonstration. Lord Peter's reappearance in the chapel, visible through the library window, demonstrated the crucial sight lines that had enabled Mrs. Dace's elaborate performance. From the sacristy's narrow hagioscope, the medieval observation slit, she could monitor both altar and library while remaining invisible to casual observation, a perfect position for orchestrating simultaneous deceptions across multiple locations. She observed Sir Cornelius's condition through these windows. His voice carried clearly across the courtyard, adjusting her performance according to his responses to the chloral hydrate that rendered him helpless while she manipulated clocks, candles, and chronology with professional precision. His return through the servants' passage revealed additional evidence of Mrs. Dace's preparation. Concealed stores of specialized candles, pharmaceutical preparations, and timing devices that transformed domestic architecture into an elaborate murder machine. Most significantly, they discovered the missing digitalis tablets that should have sustained Sir Cornelius's cardiac condition, replaced with identical-appearing placebos that ensured fatal deterioration according to her carefully calculated schedule. Professional euthanasia, Lord Peter observed grimly as he emerged from behind the bookcase, disguised as supernatural intervention and domestic accident. Mrs. Dace's nursing expertise included considerable pharmaceutical knowledge, chloral hydrate for incapacitation, digitalis manipulation for the final stroke, and mechanical theatrics to provide misdirection while she maintained alibis through acoustic projection and chronological confusion. The final demonstration involved coordinating all elements simultaneously. The metronome's measured rhythm, the window's controlled draft, the bell's mechanical chiming, and the candle's resurrection performed with mathematical precision. The assembled household watched in fascinated horror as domestic objects revealed their transformation into instruments of calculated murder. Observe how temporal confusion multiplies when clocks disagree systematically, Lord Peter announced as various timepieces proclaimed different hours with stubborn mechanical confidence. Mrs. Dace created chronological chaos to conceal the actual timing of Sir Cornelius's death. He expired hours before anyone believed possible, while she maintained elaborate alibis through this machinery of misdirection. As the demonstration concluded, the impossible candle continued burning with mechanical persistence. The chapel bell chimed midnight with automated precision, and the servants' passages exhaled their ancient secrets into the Dorset night. Mrs. Dace's theatrical masterpiece stood revealed as mechanical ingenuity applied to methodical murder, a performance that had succeeded too completely for its own concealment. "Inspector," Lord Peter announced with quiet satisfaction, adjusting his monocle as the wind pressed against ancient casements. "We now possess not merely motive and opportunity, but method demonstrated with scientific precision. Mrs. Dace's flight to London represents acknowledgement of guilt rather than innocence seeking vindication. Her elaborate conspiracy against time and candlelight has been exposed as human calculation, masquerading as divine intervention." The investigation had transformed impossible supernatural events into inevitable mechanical conclusions through the simple expedient of theatrical recreation and patient observation of criminal ingenuity, applied to lethal purpose with chilling professional expertise. The theatrical recreation had exposed the mechanical precision of Mrs. Dace's conspiracy, but Inspector Moffat's expression suggested a man still grappling with the transformation of impossible phenomena into criminal methodology. Lord Peter, who had observed that the most elaborate deceptions invariably contained the seeds of their own exposure, settled into Sir Cornelius's chair with the satisfied air of someone preparing to deliver a particularly elegant mathematical proof. "Inspector," he began with ceremonial precision, "we have witnessed not divine intervention, but human ingenuity applied to murderous purpose with chilling professional expertise. Mrs. Ada Dace has orchestrated perhaps the most sophisticated temporal conspiracy in the annals of criminal endeavor, a murder that required not merely poison and opportunity, but the systematic manipulation of reality itself." He indicated the persistent candle with his monocle, its flame maintaining that stubborn defiance of natural law that had so perplexed their investigation. "The instrument of theatrical deception employs children's party tricks elevated to criminal sophistication. Beeswax candles, specially treated with magnesium compounds in their double-core wicks, create the illusions of supernatural resurrection through elementary chemistry. When oxygen is withdrawn, by our inverted tumbler, the flame expires but leaves a glowing ember. Reintroduce oxygen at precisely the calculated moment." He gestured toward the adjusted window, "and resurrection occurs with mechanical reliability." Parker examined the metronome, still maintaining its measured 60-beat rhythm. The timing mechanism provided mathematical precision for coordinating multiple deceptions simultaneously. "Precisely." Mrs. Dace transformed this library into an elaborate clockwork murder machine with every element: windows, bells, clocks, and candles, orchestrated according to her professional requirements. Lord Peter consulted his leather notebook with scientific thoroughness. The missing Georgian salver served as her mobile laboratory, transporting specialized equipment between library and chapel while maintaining the appearance of routine domestic activity. The true horror of the murder method emerged through systematic reconstruction of Tuesday evening's carefully choreographed events. Sir Cornelius had been rendered helpless through chloral hydrate administration, the brown residue on his chair arm bearing witness to pharmaceutical expertise rather than accidental spillage. His prescribed digitalis had been systematically replaced with inert placebos over several days, creating the appearance of natural cardiac decline while ensuring fatal vulnerability when required. "Professional euthanasia," Lord Peter observed grimly, "disguised as devotional accident." Mrs. Dace possessed medical training that extended far beyond domestic management into territories where life and death decisions were made with clinical detachment. Her employment through the St. Agatha's private registry specialized in delicate cases requiring absolute discretion. Wealthy families seeking professional assistance in expediting inconvenient deaths. The psychological architecture underlying such elaborate murder revealed complexities extending beyond simple elimination of threats. Mrs. Dace had derived profound satisfaction from controlling every aspect of her environment, transforming death into performance art that demonstrated her intellectual superiority over both victims and investigators. "Observe the meticulous precision she imposed upon Tuesday evening's chronology," Lord Peter continued, indicating the deliberately adjusted landing clock. "The digitalis manipulation required weeks of careful preparation, gradually weakening Sir Cornelius while she constructed her theatrical apparatus, with the thoroughness of someone orchestrating a complex musical performance." Inspector Moffat leaned forward with grudging fascination. "The motive?" "The preservation of deadly secrets," Lord Peter replied, producing Sir Cornelius's correspondence. "Our victim had discovered Mrs. Dace's role in Lord Pemberton's suspicious demise 15 years previous, officially heart failure, but Scotland Yard was reopening the investigation with uncomfortable attention to private nurses employed during his final illness. The Tuesday telegram warning of Thursday demonstration threatened exposure that would destroy not merely her current position, but reveal her lethal expertise to authorities. The elaborate alibi construction demonstrated additional psychological motivations extending beyond practical necessity. Mrs. Dace had orchestrated apparent supernatural intervention to deflect investigation, while simultaneously proving her mastery over natural law itself. The impossible candle, synchronized bells, and chronological confusion served to demonstrate her intellectual superiority through methods that defied conventional understanding. She employed the servants' passages, monastic night stairs connecting every room, to maintain simultaneous presence in multiple locations while establishing acoustic alibis through carefully positioned sound projection. The soundproofed chapel chamber allowed mechanical bell operation without visible human agency, while the hagioscope provided perfect observation of both altar and library during her performance. Young Ivy's testimony of mysterious chapel activities, Pottle's observations of irregular candlelight, and Cook's memory of metallic scents all gained significance when understood as evidence of Mrs. Dace's rehearsals and equipment testing. She had transformed religious artifacts into instruments of deception, casting herself as divine agent, dispensing appropriate justice rather than criminal murderer. The petrol purchase signed with Arthur Blackthorne's name represented the final theatrical flourish, Lord Peter observed. Mrs. Dace borrowed his motor, disguised herself with muffler and hat, and created false evidence while establishing her own alibi through acoustic manipulation and chronological misdirection. The assembled evidence revealed Mrs. Dace as someone who had transformed professional nursing into an art form of controlled killing, deriving psychological satisfaction from patients' helpless dependence while orchestrating their deaths with clinical precision disguised as compassionate care. Her 15-year career in managing difficult cases had evolved into intellectual sadism expressed through elaborate theatrical murders. She fled to London, Lord Peter concluded, adjusting his monocle as footsteps echoed in the passage beyond. Not from guilt, but from frustrated artistic pride. Her masterpiece succeeded too completely. The very impossibility of her effects demanded explanation rather than acceptance. The library door opened with supernatural timing, admitting Parker and a figure whose pale composure had finally cracked under the weight of exposed secrets. Mrs. Dace entered with the resigned dignity of someone whose carefully constructed performance had reached its inevitable conclusion. Mrs. Dace entered the library with the measured composure of someone whose carefully orchestrated performance had reached its inevitable final act, though her pale hands betrayed tremors that no amount of professional training could entirely suppress. Her usually impeccable appearance showed subtle signs of strain, hair slightly askew, the rigid posture that had defined her throughout the investigation now carrying the weight of accumulated deception. "I received word that my presence was required," she announced with that peculiar flatness reserved for acknowledging defeat while maintaining dignity. The London train proved remarkably efficient this evening. Lord Peter regarded her with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly complex mechanical device, finally revealing its operational principles. "Indeed, Mrs. Dace, we have been conducting experiments with your theatrical apparatus. Most illuminating results." Her gaze moved systematically across the library's evidence of their midnight demonstration. The specialized candles with their telltale metallic residue, the adjusted window maintaining its precise half-inch opening, the metronome still ticking its measured 60-beat rhythm, and the servants' passage door standing ajar like an architectural confession. "I trust you found the domestic arrangements satisfactory," she said with careful neutrality. Sir Cornelius maintained exacting standards regarding household efficiency. "Efficiency elevated to an art form," Lord Peter observed, producing the small brown bottle from behind the desk. The systematic replacement of digitalis with inert substitutes, the gradual weakening through pharmaceutical manipulation, the construction of temporal alibis through mechanical precision, all demonstrate remarkable professional competence. Inspector Moffat consulted his notebook with official gravity. "The Saint. Agatha's private registry confirms your employment history with wealthy families requiring delicate medical assistance. Lord Pemberton's death has been reclassified as suspicious, with particular attention to pharmaceutical irregularities during his final illness. Mrs. Dace's composure flickered like a candle encountering unexpected draught. I provided compassionate nursing care, nothing more. Compassionate care, Lord Peter continued relentlessly. That included access to chloral hydrate for maintaining patient docility, evidenced by the brown residue on Sir Cornelius's chair arm, and intimate knowledge of digitalist dosages sufficient to create fatal cardiac irregularities while maintaining the appearance of natural progression. The evidence accumulated with mathematical precision. The Georgian salver bearing chemical residues from her mobile laboratory, the specialized candles with their resurrection properties achieved through magnesium-treated wicks, the modified window mechanisms for controlled atmospheric manipulation, and the servants' passages that had enabled simultaneous presence in multiple locations during Tuesday evening's elaborate performance. You transformed domestic architecture into an instrument of murder, Lord Peter observed with quiet satisfaction, employing medieval passages, acoustic modifications, and chronological manipulation to create alibis that defied conventional investigation. The impossible candle, synchronized bells, and temporal confusion served to deflect attention while you orchestrated death with clinical precision. Mrs. Dace's resistance began crumbling under the accumulated weight of exposed methodology. Her pale eyes, which had maintained cold composure through decades of managing inconvenient deaths, now betrayed the exhaustion of someone whose elaborate intellectual construction was collapsing with mechanical inevitability. "Because gentlemen prefer miracles," she said with sudden, bitter clarity. "They will swallow a marvel rather than a truth. A man dies with supernatural phenomena. They invoke providence. He dies because a woman has measured his pulse and calculated his drops. They demand the gallows. I preferred providence. Until Sir Cornelius threatened to expose your methods," Parker interjected, appearing in the doorway with two uniformed constables whose presence transformed the library into a formal court of justice. "He discovered correspondence regarding the Pemberton inquiry," Mrs. Dace admitted with mechanical precision. 15 years of careful service would have been destroyed by his archaeological pedantry. Sir Cornelius collected lives as he collected chalices. He threatened to use me as his final footnote in exposing art fraud networks. The confession emerged with systematic thoroughness, revealing someone whose pride in professional competence outweighed considerations of legal consequences. She detailed weeks of preparation, gradually replacing medications, testing theatrical apparatus, rehearsing passage rotes, and calculating precise timing for simultaneous deceptions across multiple locations. The theatrical elements were necessary, she continued with chilling clinical detachment, to deflect investigation from pharmaceutical evidence toward supernatural explanations that rational minds would ultimately reject, while overlooking the medical expertise that made elimination possible. Her psychological motivations revealed themselves through bitter explanation, intellectual satisfaction derived from controlling life and death decisions, professional pride in managing complex eliminations without detection, and profound contempt for patients whose wealth could not protect them from her clinical judgment regarding their continued usefulness. As Parker stepped forward with formal charges, Mrs. Dace maintained her composure with the dignity of someone whose intellectual superiority had been acknowledged even through exposure. The household facade, maintained through decades of respectability, finally shattered as Pollard sat heavily in his chair, Cook sobbed into her apron, and young Ivy clung to the doorpost. "One does not submit to footnotes," Mrs. Dace observed with final professional pride as the constables approached. "One composes the text." Lord Peter reached out and stilled the metronome with one finger. The sudden silence felt almost indecent after hours of mechanical precision. "Time," he remarked quietly, "has been misused enough for one evening." The impossible candle continued burning with mechanical persistence, its flame now serving as memorial to elaborate criminal ingenuity rather than supernatural intervention, while the investigation reached its inevitable conclusion through the simple application of logic to theatrical deception. The mechanical precision of Mrs. Dace's theatrical conspiracy had been exposed with scientific thoroughness, but the legal machinery that processed her confession moved with considerably less dramatic flair than her elaborate murder apparatus. Within 3 weeks, Winchester Assizes had transformed pharmaceutical expertise applied to lethal purpose into mundane criminal charges, though the popular press preferred sensational accounts of impossible candles and mechanical resurrection over the prosaic reality of chloral hydrate and magnesium-treated wicks. Mrs. Ada Dace received the death sentence with the same professional composure she had maintained throughout 15 years of managing inconvenient patients for wealthy families requiring delicate medical assistance. The St. Agatha's private registry, confronted with systematic exposure of their most discreet practitioners, closed permanently amid Scotland Yard investigations that revealed pharmaceutical murder disguised as compassionate nursing care across multiple suspicious deaths. Arthur Blackthorne inherited Blackthorne Priory with its collection of questionable relics and legitimate debts, his vindication arriving too late to restore his uncle's posthumous reputation for scholarly accuracy. The disputed Glastonbury Charter proved genuinely medieval upon independent examination, though Sir Cornelius's exposure as both creator and detector of forgeries had already scandalized the county society beyond any nephew's rehabilitation efforts. The relics themselves presented delicate problems requiring diplomatic solutions. Sir Cornelius's correspondence revealed systematic acquisition of monastic treasures through methods that made Mrs. Dace's pharmaceutical approach seem refreshingly direct by comparison. The British Museum, consulted through Parker's efficient intervention, accepted temporary custody of certain items pending provenance investigations, while the vicar of St. Ethelburga's recovered his parish chalice with that particular ecclesiastical tact reserved for acknowledging sins without encouraging gossip. Pollard accepted employment with Arthur's creditors, managing properties whose previous owners had avoided mysterious deaths through careful attention to their prescribed medications. Young Ivy found domestic service with a London family whose household arrangements required no pharmaceutical expertise, while Cook retired to a cottage where she regaled visitors with increasingly elaborate accounts of supernatural phenomena, reduced to party tricks through amateur detection. The village of Blackthorne embraced supernatural explanations with enthusiastic determination, despite Lord Peter's methodical exposure of mechanical trickery. The Saracen's Head developed profitable ghost tours featuring the chapel where impossible flames had burned, while local legend transformed Mrs. Dace from calculating murderer into witch whose evil had been thwarted by divine intervention rather than patient observation of inconsistent chronology and theatrical candle behavior. Lord Peter's final observations. Lord Peter's departure occurred on a December morning when frost had transformed the Dorset landscape into crystalline perfection that rendered mechanical deception unnecessary, given nature's own theatrical capabilities. He found the impossible candle finally extinguished in Scotland Yard's evidence room, its resurrection properties neutralized by bureaucratic storage rather than scientific intervention. One observes, he remarked to Parker as their Daimler navigated frost-whitened lanes, that candles possess no moral agency whatsoever. They burn according to oxygen and chemistry rather than ethics or theatrical necessity. Mrs. Dace's fundamental error lay in assuming that mechanical ingenuity could permanently disguise human calculation as divine intervention. Inspector Moffat, accompanying them to the station, offered grudging professional respect. "Remarkable detection, my lord, though I confess preference for cases requiring less theatrical recreation." "Ah, Inspector," Lord Peter replied with characteristic philosophical detachment. "But where lies the entertainment in conventional murder? Mrs. Dace elevated domestic elimination to performance art, transforming pharmaceutical expertise into elaborate conspiracy against chronology itself. She deserved an audience capable of appreciating such ambitious criminality. The Channel wind pressed against ancient casements with familiar persistence, providing that atmospheric commentary which had enabled Mrs. Dace's acoustic deceptions through soundproofed chambers and synchronized bell operations. Church bells announced noon with conventional punctuality, their chimes carrying no sinister precision or mechanical conspiracy. Merely time restored to innocent purposes after temporary conscription into criminal service. English weather, Lord Peter observed with quiet satisfaction, consulting his pocket watch with the precision of someone who had witnessed temporal manipulation applied to murderous purpose, displays perverse reliability in providing appropriate atmospheric conditions for whatever theatrical nonsense human beings require. Mrs. Dace simply applied this meteorological cooperation to lethal rather than recreational entertainment. As Blackthorn Priory receded through the rear window, its ancient stones resuming their patient vigil over secrets both exposed and concealed, Lord Peter settled into comfortable contemplation of human nature's eternal preference for miracles over methodology. Candles, consciences, and weather, he murmured with characteristic wit. None entirely reliable, all absolutely indispensable. Mrs. Dace understood the first two principles perfectly. Unfortunately, she underestimated the third's capacity for providing investigative assistance to patient observers of impossible phenomena. The investigation had concluded with mechanical precision, leaving behind only frost-covered lanes, conventional chronometry, and the enduring mystery of why rational human beings invariably preferred supernatural explanations to pharmaceutical expertise applied with chilling professional competence.